Welcome, everybody. Great to see so many. Velkommen, god dagen. So there were even people from Iceland joining in here. So today Lina and I are going to take you to this amazing, magical place underwater in Greenland called Ikkafjord. As we all know, there are rapid changes happening in the Arctic, and that also affects this fjord. And that's what we're gonna take you a little bit into today, what's happening here underwater. So first of all, Lina, you have to. Thanks. Lina is in charge here.
Yeah, I'm in charge of the all the technology here, so it can go
Yeah, I have to
wherever.
remember that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
next slide.
I'll try my best. So,
Good, Lina, next slide. Yeah, so this is me. I'm a geologist specialized on geochemistry. I have been so fortunate to work in Ikkafjord since I did my master's thesis back in 1995. And I fell so in love with this place, so I never abandoned the project. I have been going on ever since. I have also been living in Iceland, and there I became addicted to Icelandic sweaters. So that's why I'm always wearing Icelandic sweaters. And if you haven't already identified it, these are Icelandic sheep on the photo here. Dina, next.
yeah, and my name is Lina Rasmusson. I'm a plant physiologist and marine ecologist at the Gothenburg University. My main thing is coralline algae. And if you don't know what coralline algae is yet, I assure you that you will in about 25 minutes when we are done with this presentation. And this photo is from the fieldwork in Ikkafjord, and it's the fabulous Rolf, who was our diver, one of our divers during the expedition, who is joining us from Denmark on this photo. So Gabrielle,
Yeah.
where
Okay.
are we in the
Yeah.
world?
Where
Take us
where are
there.
we? Yeah. So here we are. Greenland is a big country. Most of it is covered by ice, but we are down here in this southwestern corner that you see marked with a yellow box, and more specifically in the inner part of Ikkafjord, you can see on the bigger map. Yeah. Okay, Lina, next. So here we switch to a photo of the inner part of the fjords. And if Lina press the next. Yeah, so here where we see this orange-yellow arrow, this is actually where we find, believe it or not, underneath this water surface, there are close to or more than 1,000 of these columns that you saw on the first slide. Next one, Lina. So we have done several geophysical mappings here in the fjord. The last one was made in 2019 by our colleague geophysicist Paul Seaman. So here he actually mapped at least 938 columns that were above half a meter tall. But if you go to the next slide, Lina. But what we can see on this photo here on the top, these columns come in all sizes from centimeter tall up to 20 meters tall. So actually now when we have been back the last couple of years with several divers, we can see there are a lot of columns that are also below these half a meter. That means there are more than 1,000 columns here in this area of the fjord. So the biggest one we have found are these 20 meters tall, and then we have one column that is up to 8 meters wide. It's a big one we call the atoll. We can also see that the new ikait, so the mineral that forms these columns, they are forming all year around. So if you cut one of these columns and you come back the next year, actually, the column would have been growing up to half a meter in that year. So it's very rapid growth for a geological system. And here to the left, I have given you a geological map. I will not go into too many details. I just want you to notice the colors. So in the fjord, you see all these black dots, and these are the columns, where we find the columns. And then you can see there is a big yellow area, and then there are these blue and brown and red colors, and they mark the roots of an old volcano. So they contain quite some special rocks that are not found so many places in the world. And we can also see that these black dots and this old volcano, they correlate. So there is a connection between these rocks, the volcanic rocks, and the columns forming in the fjord. Okay, next. Yeah, so when we came in 1995, that was actually the first time there was a scientific expedition to the fjord. But if you ask the local Inuit, the Greenlanders living in the area, there is an old legend describing these columns that go much further back. And it was described in this literature source by Ring called Eskimoiske Eventyr and Sagn. So this is an old Inuit legend that told the story about the Norse families living in this fjord, and they did really live there. And we see several ruins still left from the Norse people. And they encountered Inuit coming down to the fjord or entering the fjord. And the Norse people, a couple of fathers with their children, they were chased out on the ice. They went through the ice and they drowned. So it's their ghosts that are now standing here as these white pillars, these frozen Norse people, the frozen Vikings that are standing on the bottom of the fjord. And if you go into the fjord early in the morning in calm weather, you can actually see, like on the photo here on the right, this is seen from a boat through the surface. So they are quite easy to see when there is no wind. And you can really easily understand why your imagination would be going on and depict all kinds of mythical creatures or frozen Vikings standing there on the bottom of the fjord. Next one. And if you want to read more, we have a really good article out written by colleagues Bengt Liljeblad and Richard Gyllenkreutz in Havsutsikt. So this webinar is being recorded, so you can access the link here and read more about these frozen Vikings that now want revenge, of course. Yeah. So what were the Norse people doing in Greenland? Well, it all goes back to Eric the Red, infamous Viking who first had to leave Norway because he killed someone. Then he settled in Iceland, and unfortunately he killed his neighbor there in Iceland and really rapidly had to move somewhere else. And he knew there was a country to the west, and so he went there with a group of key people. And then he was the one who named it Greenland. So it all dates back to Erik the Red, why this country is now called Greenland. And he named it Greenland because he wanted to attract new settlers, mainly from Iceland. And of course, Greenland sounds much more inviting than Greenland sounds more inviting than Iceland. And if we go to the next picture, this is where he settled in Brattahlid. And you can see even today it is indeed very nice green area. And back in the time when Erik the Red came to the area, it was the climate was even warmer, the sea level was lower, so it was quite a good place to settle for the Norse people back then. And we now know there were probably around 6,000 Norse people who lived at the peak time here in Greenland. So the biggest one was Østeribygd, and this is now called Grasiasuk here in Greenland. And then there was the one further up in Nuuk called Vestribygd, the West Settlement. And if we go to the next one. But also in our middle area, in Ikkafjord, there were several Norse people, as we already know from the legend. So we see a lot of ruins still in Ikkafjord. The one to the right is one of the best preserved because big parts of the walls are still there. And this is probably one that was used for storage of food. But in 2021, when my husband, Erik Støkel, and Richard Gyllenkreutz, they were doing geological mapping, they actually found another ruin here at the foot of this cliff you see on the left side. And this was not a ruin that was recorded so far. So we photographed and documented, and then it's now registered at the Greenland National Museum and Archive. So quite exciting to actually do a finding like this. Next one. Yeah, and then we have been so fortunate to have two German professional divers photographers with us. Uli Kunz and Florian Huber has provided us with amazing video footage and photos. So this is work by Uli Kunz. So we will take you underwater here a couple of minutes, and I say just enjoy. Lina, are you muted? Or is the music on? Yeah, I don't know what happened to the music here. Otherwise, there was some very nice background music too.
Oh, you didn't. I heard it. You didn't hear it.
I
That's
didn't hear
unfortunate.
anything.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's too bad. But
Yeah.
that's technology. So sorry.
Yeah, we just have to remember it for the animation later
Mm.
on. Yeah, okay. Okay, so this mineral ikait that builds or makes up these 1,000 columns, what is that? So we already heard from the video here, it's a rare mineral, and if we look at the chemical composition, it's a calcium carbonate mineral surrounded by 6 water molecules. So calcium carbonate is something we know really well. It's actually just chalk, calcite or aragonite, But what makes this mineral special is that it has all this water in it. So you can actually compare it to a mixture of ice and chalk. And here to the right, I have shown you a pressure temperature diagram. And this is just to show you the area where this ikait mineral would be stable, where you would expect to find it. And we can see it's at very high pressures. We're talking kilobars here and low temperature. And these are not conditions that are found anywhere on Earth. Meaning, when we find this ikait, it's what we call a metastable mineral. It shouldn't actually exist. It should be either a calcite or a aragonite that is forming, but for various reasons, calcite and aragonite are prevented from forming, and we get ikait instead. But because it contains all this water, we know ice melts at 0 degrees. We are also dealing with a mineral that's very sensitive to high temperatures. So at least in Ikkafjord, we see when seawater goes above 6 degrees, this is really the threshold, where the fragile threshold, where it's still stable or it starts to decompose into other minerals or even completely collapse, depending on how high the temperature is. Yeah. So if you look at this model over Ikkafjord, I already told you the rocks, these roots of the old volcano, is really important for the formation of these columns. But it all starts with CO2, carbon dioxide, from the atmosphere being dissolved in rainwater and in snow. And we all know that there's more and more CO2 going into the atmosphere. So what this does, it creates a slightly acidic solution. The rainwater is slightly acidic. So when it runs through these old mountains, it's actually able to dissolve minerals in the mountains. And when it enters at the end, down at the bottom of the fjord and goes up through fractures, it's actually a very basic solution, a sodium carbonate bicarbonate solution. And this is something you used, at least in the old days, for cleaning. It was very efficient, a soda solution. And this solution then seeps into the fjord. And then we'll see what happens in the next slide animation. So we'll just check if the sound works here, Lina.
Did you hear
Yeah,
it?
no, I didn't hear anything.
I tried to. Is there anyone who is like a technical genius who knows how to do this? Sorry, I'm just gonna go out and see if I can change the sound.
I mean, there are subtitles. It would just be nice to hear
Yeah, I'm not sure how
Paul's
to actually do
voice.
this because I hear the sound, but
Yeah.
I think it's something with properties of where Zoom should get the sound, but I'm not sure where you change it.
Okay. Otherwise, we'll
Yeah.
just have to go with the subtitles.
Yeah.
okay.
So I think Zoom is now getting your speaker sound and not the computer sound, for example.
Mm. Okay. Good to know for the future.
Yeah.
We have the subtitles.
Oops. Okay, good thing we had the subtitles at least. Then the next question is, why is Ikkafjord and the only place in the world where these columns are forming? So we already identified these rare rocks found in the roots of the old volcano, carbonatites and nepheline cyanide rocks. Furthermore, we are in a part of Greenland where there is no permafrost, and that's really lucky because that means this rainwater with the CO2 can run through these old mountains and dissolve the minerals all year around. Then we saw in the animation, it plays an important role that these mountains are 500 meters tall. They create an artesian pressure that makes the fluid under pressure, so they can go up through the fractures in the fjord. And we also have a clay membrane that allows this fluid to slowly seep into the seawater and create this saturation of the ikait mineral. Then we know there's a lot of magnesium in the seawater, and at low temperatures, this means that calcite is actually prevented from forming and then promoting ikait instead. But most importantly, it's the low seawater temperatures. These are really the key this is a key parameter to why we have this ikait forming in Ikkafjord. Furthermore, this is a protected shallow part of the fjord, this inner part. So there are no glaciers carving in the fjord, and there are all these thresholds that prevents icebergs from the outside coming into this inner part of the fjord. So it is really a very protected, shallow area, just ideal for column formation. And finally, which makes this even more interesting, is what role does the biology play here? So on the photo on the right, you can see beautiful ikait crystals covered in a glue. And this glue is what we would call biofilm. So inside the columns, there are this magnificent, unique bacteria ecosystem. We have a lot of bacteria, enzymes that are only found inside the columns. And it seems like they play an important role. It looks like I'm frozen now in the photo. No. So Lina, the next one. So ikait crystals are found around the world, mainly in the cold areas, but it's the column formation that is unique. So if you look at ikait crystals, so one of the more recent discoveries were in sea ice in both Arctic and Arctic waters. So you actually have carbonate phase inside the sea ice. That's quite interesting. And on the more exotic examples are Greenland shrimps that were exported to Japan and had these annoying white spots, and that turned out to be ikait crystals. Next one. So going back to the bacteria, so what we did, a colleague, Erik Trampe and I, a couple of years ago, we had these experiments running where we had the fluids of seawater and carbonate mixing. So it's the same fluid that goes into both of these experiments, the geo and the bio. But on the right side, we introduced cyanobacteria from Ikkafjord into the experiments. And what you can see here is that both the ikait crystals became bigger, much bigger, and also that they started gluing together. And this was really exciting and very surprising. And this really, needs further investigations because it looks like it is really the biology that's a key factor here for the column growth. Next one. Yeah, so why did Lina and the other biologists come into this project here in recent years? That's going back to 1995 when we went there the first time. What we saw in Ikkafjord were photos or pictures like this. So this actually looked like coral reef in the Arctic. So amazing, so surprising, so overwhelming. But next slide. When we came back in 2018 and 2019, the column suddenly looked like this. So very, very different. And we had Navy divers, Danish Navy divers helping us, and they were measuring the temperature in the fjord. And to my utter shock, you know, even at the bottom of the fjord around the columns, it was above 6.
I think we lost Gabrielle.
Oh.
See if she comes back.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, okay.
Fantastic.
Okay, please continue.
Technical issues.
Yeah.
Okay. So how much did you hear of this?
We heard that it was really hot in 2018 and 19, and the pillars looked like this.
Yeah. Okay. So, Lina, if you go next. So what I could actually see here just from the photos is that there was no longer just this beautiful ikait snowy white mineral forming. I could also identify these more yellowish, full of whole areas. And that told me that that other minerals were probably forming here. Next. But most importantly, my question was, where the hell did all the biology go? Where are these magnificent, fantastic coral reefs we saw in 95? Next one. So with the help of our divers, I managed to get the pieces of the columns back home that we then ran analysis on, and true enough, so the center of the columns were no longer ikait. It was this other mineral monohydrocalcite. So quite similar to ikait, but with just one water molecule in it. And it showed that a dehydration had taken place due to warming of the seawater. So only the new minerals that were forming on the side of the columns were still ikait. So the white stuff you see here on the left side. So there was definitely something that had happened, both to the mineralogy and also to the biology. And I think this is where you take over, Lina.
So with that, Gabrielle contacted me because I, at the time, was running another project with coralline algae in the Arctic, and I was then at the same department, the Earth Science department, as Gabrielle was at. So she described to and said that the pillars are getting whiter and or more this yellowish color. We don't really see the coralline algae. And for you who's wondering, what is the coralline algae? It's actually the pink stuff you see, because coralline algae is named because in the beginning people thought they were actually corals because they resemble corals quite a lot. And the coralline algae were then getting paler and or disappeared. So we started to wonder, is this due to the increased temperature, or even more likely, is it more intense heat spikes? And heat spikes and marine heat waves, it's when you have just a couple of days of very high temperatures that might just change the biological life, because the organism don't have any opportunity to adapt or change to cope with the heat. Then we were wondering, because you could also see on these pillars that you always saw urchins, but on these white pillars you saw a lot of urchins. So is it an enhanced grazing pressure that might change the whole macroalgae cover? Because we have macrophytes, macroalgae in the Ikkafjord as well, several kelp species and so on. But when the urchins and other animals don't graze on these ones, they start grazing on the coralline algae that are made of calcareous material, calcite. So it's the last thing they eat, but when they don't have anything else to eat, they start grazing on these ones. Or could it be that it's a decreased substrate stability because of if the pillars are then starting to just erode, then the algae don't have any substrate to actually colonize. So with that, we send in an application to NAPA to do project. So it's called the Ikait Columns, Past and Future and Prospects in Changing Arctic 2025 to 25. So what we started with was going through all the video and photo material we had from 95 and 97. There was an expedition in 2007, and then we also had data from 22 and 24. And with that, we wanted to start a baseline and initiate a biomonitoring program. So what I've, together with other people, have been doing is looking into the epiflora and fauna coverage of the pillars or the columns, and check the coverage and density, and also look at what kind of species we do find. What we have focused on is then the coralline red algae and also sea urchins, because those two seems to be two of the major players in this fjord. So this is Valhalla. It's an area that Gabrielle and Paul started filming in 2024. So we hadn't really found this place before. And you see this amazing area. It's just teeming with life. You see a lot of sea squirts and hydroids and sea urchin and other animals on here. And you also see the coralline algae closest to here, just encrusting the whole pillars. And within the project, Gabrielle told me that I was allowed to bring 2 divers. So I went through my catalog of great people and chose these ones. As you see, specimen A here, it's a person who's actually worked in the Arctic before. It's a nice specimen, Petter Lundberg from Bygdeå in Västerbotten. And specimen B is a guy not so used to polar conditions that I found on the streets of Majorna, Robin Svensson. And you could also see that Robin, after a couple of weeks in the Arctic, actually wore a hat. So he learned something, but he still wears the flip-flops. So back to the coralline algae. The coralline algae, as you can see on this picture, it works like a sturdy exoskeleton. So it's actually protecting and holding the ikait pillars together. And also, of course, then it makes a really nice settling surface for so many marine organisms, as you can see here. And the thing is that if you think of the Arctic, not just if you have the cliffs and so on, you have surfaces where the animals can attach. But here you have around 1,000 pillars just standing up in the middle of the water column, just there for all these animals and plants to actually attach to. So these pillars are just fantastic for the marine biodiversity, because they make this outstanding settling substrates for the marine life. And as I said, when it comes to the temperature, if you look at these temperature data we have here, you can see that in August 96, where we want to be where the dark blue is. Most of the fjord is in the dark blue colors, which is around 1.5 degrees Celsius. And you can see on the top that it's warmer, but actually where we have the pillars, it's quite cool. But you see in 2021 that we are, and this is then coming back from the heat spikes in 2019, that it still has an influence with warmer waters in 2021. That is slowly becoming colder again. So now when we were there in 2024, we actually had these temperatures that the ikait can cope with. And in June 2025, even better, the fjord is back to cold. And how is that then influencing, or probably influencing, the marine life? What we could see in 95, we do have a lower coverage. The pink is the Prastos coralline algae. We have a lower coverage today than we had back in 95 and 97, but it still has seemed to bounce back since mid-2000. And then we have the filamentous algae, which is quite high continuously, but you see the filamentous algae is mainly on the top, so you don't really have it down on the pillars, it's more on the top. what we do see, though, is that the macroalgae, the brown ones, they in the middle here, they have declined over the years. And if that has something to do with temperature, that is something we can discuss. But if we look into this picture, we can see the relative abundance of, to the left, we have all the macrofauna that we have, but to the right, it's the urchins. And as you can see in 2022 to 2024, we have a lot of, we have more urchins than before. So you see then that dense, then we have more than 10 urchins per square meter. We have more of that now than we had earlier in the years. We also have the macrofauna in general on the left is quite consistent over the years, but we do see that we have more urchins, and the urchins are really obnoxious grazers on everything, but especially the fleshy macroalgae. So that might probably be the reason for this decline. Then, as I said, coralline algae is, first of all, the exoskeleton, but also this substrate, because they have a really, their surface is really rugged. So you can, there's a lot of different animals and plants that can attach to the coralline algae. So we looked into, because that was one of the reasons with the project as well, to see how important are the coralline algae for this ecosystem. And as you can see here, most of the sessile animals that we do have is actually attached on the coralline algae and not on the ikait. So with a demise in the ikait, that would be a demise for coralline algae because they won't have a substrate, and that in turn would be a demise in the biodiversity when it comes to fauna. And what is really important with this, or quite new discovery, is that coralline algae is known to be like a glue on coral reefs, keeping the reefs together. But now here we can show that we have a really, they work also as a very important fortifying structure in Arctic ecosystems as well. And as I said, these pillars are really heightening the biodiversity of Arctic ecosystems in total. So what we're doing now is that we're going through all this data. We're writing a paper. I'm looking into, I have some ideas what I would like to look into. For instance, if the coralline algae can attach to this carbonite that Gabrielle was talking about, when it's actually the calcite, this Emmentaler cheese stuff, if it can also settle on those structures as well as the ikait, because if not, then we would have a problem losing a lot of coralline algae, which means a loss of biodiversity. And with that, we're going to go through some of the political things going on in the Arctic. So I give the word to Gabrielle again.
Yeah, so I should mention that Ikka Fjord and surrounding, it's a protected area. It's a kind of a nature reserve now. However, dating further back, there was a mining license, prospecting license given to a mining company. And they started coming back to the area a couple of years ago and searching for interesting minerals and metals for green transition, green technology. And in January last year, we really got a shock because they were now asking for a new license. So in the yellow line, that was their old area, and now they wanted to expand that area, searching for minerals. And that now covers the whole Ikkafjord area, exactly where we have the columns. So yeah, so that was quite a fright. And if you go to the next one. Yeah, but luckily, in the end, seen from our perspective at least, this is how it ended up. So at least the Ikkafjord itself is no longer under this prospecting license. But if you go to the next one. But the problem still remains that these rare earth elements, the metals we are looking for that are so attractive for the green technology, they are sitting in this carbonatite rock that is the same rock that provides the fluids with the carbonates that then goes into the columns. So you cannot extract these rare earth elements without destroying the whole process of the column formation. Next one. So we fully acknowledge that Greenland wants to earn money on something. So it will have to be a Greenland decision that whether you go for mining here or you keep this unique ecosystem and this unique nature phenomena. But yeah, we definitely think it would be a loss to lose Ikkafjord and the biodiversity. Next, is that you, Lina? Yeah.
Yeah, and with that, this is our fabulous team that has worked during this time. So you see the team that was in the Ikkafjord in 2024, divers, researchers, filmers, photographers. We had a couple of amazing weeks doing all the research, and then especially we want to thank Gunuk, who is our local entrepreneur who helps us with everything. Without him, we wouldn't be able to do the work we do. And then we had the students helping us to identify animals and plants on the ikait pillars. So we had Annie, Alex, and Jacob. And then Erik Sturkell doing the work with, looking for, working with the geology in the area. And then, of course, Bengt, who has been doing a lot of the oceanographic background data with doing CTDs on the temperature and so on, and modeling of that. And with that, we just want to say thank you so much for joining us on our trip back to the Ikkafjord. Thank you very much.